Thanks be to God. What makes you come alive? Where's your purpose and your passion? Civil rights leader Howard Thurmon once wrote, "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Rather, ask yourself what makes you come alive. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. Indeed, they do." The theology that supports this can be found in our liturgy. It isn't enough for you just to show up. Cowboy culture is still dominated by a larger-than-life image projected by the most outstanding cowboy actor ever, and that would be John Wayne. The rough and tumble, heart of gold, good guy character that he often perfected on screen always succeeded in embodying the qualities of honor, loyalty, bravery, and commitment. John Wayne's cowboys didn't just look good, they were good. In the classic Rio Bravo, Wayne's character summed up the essence of the cowboy philosophy by declaring to a less than perfect sidekick, "Just showing up doesn't get it done." If you show up without discovering who you are, in my kids' vocabulary, they might say you are a waste of skin. Such a person's talent is useless, pointless, and wasted. So, how do we avoid such an end? First, we must embrace that we are, if we haven't already, and I know many of us here are on the older side of life. Could I say that? We don't have as many years in front of us as we have behind us. But learning to embrace and understand that we are uniquely created persons, seeking, and we must seek, just to be you. It can be a struggle for many of us because we've grown up in households where we were often seen as extensions of our parents. And so often we equate the battle to be oneself with selfishness, but it's not. Many of us grew up and were taught to imitate others because it was shaming to be different, to be simply ourselves. Modern psychology refers to being something that we are not, as creating our false selves that we often present to others. There's no standard for normal. We're all different. Leonard Sweet writes, "Be yourself. It has always been true. Everybody wants everyone else to be just like them." Oscar Wilde said, tongue-in-cheek, that the first duty in life is to be as artificial as possible. And then he continued, "What the second is, no one yet has discovered." For this time, God has called you to this place with your unique gifts, talents, sense of humor, enthusiasm, and personality. And Westminster needs you to be you. God has called you to be you. Again, an old cowboy might declare, "You can put a boot in the oven, but it won't come out a biscuit." We must make our biscuits from scratch using the energy, the talents, the skills, and the gifts God has given us. Anglican Bishop Rowan Williams states that the vocation of creatures is to exist as themselves, to be bearers of their names, answering to the word that gives each its distinctive identity. The act of creation could be seen as quite simply this: the vocation of things to be themselves, distinctive, spare, and strange. God does not first create and then differentiate a great multitude of roles within creation in one act. God creates a multiple, noisy, jostling, diverse reality. The time is now, and the challenge for each of us as followers of Jesus is to claim our unique identities and to allow room for each of us to claim our unique identities. To do otherwise will result in not just personal failure, but corporate loss. We are all in this thing together. We are one body. So the first step in coming alive is learning to be comfortable in our own skin. Be you. Just be you. Because no one else can be you. Who Am I Meant to Be by Anne Drain-Steris is an online quiz, and it can be found on Oprah.com. It's free, and it's based on personality styles. I took it, found it to be quite accurate and helpful as well. The next step in coming alive is learning that following Christ is about fulfillment. It's about discovering what brings each of us joy. Yes, Jesus said that in this life you will have troubles, but he also said, I have come that you might have life and have it abundantly. And Jesus again says, I have told you these things so that you will be filled with joy. Your joy will overflow. It's not often associated with being a Christian, is it? That kind of joy? So the second question, first being, are you being your best self? The second question, what brings you joy? Is it serving others? Is it leading others? Is it getting involved in helping others receive justice? Do you love to see people learn? Does it bring you joy to work with children? Does what you're doing in your church bring you joy? Does it energize you? Find a work you love, and it won't be considered work. Billy Joel's advice: if you're not doing what you love, you're wasting your time. So, I want to talk about a man named Denny Brower. Denny was a bricklayer, made a good living at it. But he had another passion, bass fishing. So one day in 1980, Denny came home and revealed his deepest desire of his heart, which no doubt shocked his wife. He wanted to move from their home in Nebraska to a place where he could fish full-time as a professional bass fisherman. You can imagine Denny's wife thought. Jack Callum in Sports Illustrated captured their prospects nicely when he wrote, deciding that you wanted to go make a livable wage as a bass angler in 1980 wasn't quite as risky as deciding that you wanted to make a livable wage, say, as a marble shooter. But it was close. But amazingly enough, Denny's wife said, let's go. and they packed up and moved to where the fish were. It turned out to be the right move. A couple decades later, Denny had a Saturday morning fishing show on ESPN, The Bass Class with Denny Brower, as well as 2 instructional videos and books. His endorsement deals with so many companies that when he goes to a tournament to fish, he is adorned with so many logos that he looks like a NASCAR driver. He's doing quite well. He transitioned from a bricklayer to a fisherman, some 310 tournaments later, and a couple $1 million in prize money and more in endorsements. I tell you that story to say that Denny had the courage to make a career change, to pursue his passion. God calls each of us to find what brings us life, what brings us joy. What do we love doing? And finally, you might want to ask yourself this question: what energizes you? Charla Kostak, in an article entitled "Finding What Energizes You," writes this: "The first time I discovered the power of something that energizes was back when we were foster parents. I quickly realized how much a new baby energized me like nothing else. From the moment we would get the phone call asking us to take a new baby, I would have this sudden burst of energy that would last for many months. Holding that precious new life in my arms, getting the privilege of pouring love into a heart that had already been hurt was electrifying. The sleepless nights, the extra laundry hardly affected me because of the high from being able to carry and care for a baby. How that energized me and kept me going. Whenever we had a new baby, I was like the Energizer Bunny. There was nothing I could accomplish. The energy that I got from holding them helped me become a better mom to my other kids, helped me do more housework, be more creative, and feel more joy." So what a great example of discovering what energizes you. What drives me as well could be a question. What could I talk about to others for hours? What do I feel passionate about? What do I do when I feel less tired afterward than before I started? What do I get so excited about that I want to tell everyone I know? How do I recharge? Finally, last but not least, do you sense a call of God? Stephen was a young man who felt the call of God in his life. He came from a close family. He finished college and then went off to seminary. After finishing seminary, he came back home before going to his first church. He visited with all of his relatives there for about a week. He stopped by the church and talked to his hometown pastor. And the pastor asked him if he'd like to preach this upcoming Sunday. Stephen felt absolutely honored, took the pastor up on his invitation. Sunday morning came, and after hours and even days of preparation, he stepped up behind the pulpit, looked at the congregation, looked at his friends and his relatives, and started to expound on the knowledge that he had learned. It takes a lot of work to impress people at home, because his little niece, Kathleen, 6 years old, got up when he started his service when he started expounding, put her hands on her hip and said, "Uncle Stephen, you don't know what you're talking about." I'm curious to know how he even finished. Undoubtedly, it will be an experience he will never forget. God calls, ordains, and sets each of us in a body. My theology says that God has called me the same way God has called you. I'll close with this. The story is told of St. Francis of Assisi, who invited a young monk to accompany him to town, specifically to preach. The young friar was excited to be with Francis and wanted to learn as much from him as he possibly could, so he watched him closely. He observed his mentor carefully as they strolled along the community streets. St. Francis would often stop and visit with the children there or the merchants. And after a while, they returned to the abbey, and the young priest said, "Sir, you have forgotten, we went to town to preach." And wisely, Francis replied, "My son, we have preached. We have been seen by many, and our behavior was closely observed. Our attitudes were measured. Our words have been overheard. It was by these measures that we preached our morning sermon." We all have a call of God in our lives, a divine compulsion that warms our hearts. When we are attentive to who we are, what brings us joy, what brings us passion, we are careful of the needs of others. God has called us to discern what brings us alive, what makes us unique. Are you seeking to be you? What brings you joy? What energizes you? Do you sense that call of God? All these questions are our responsibility to answer. And when we do, when we answer them and we respond, God's kingdom will advance here on earth. Amen. please join me in